Wrap up real quick.
Okay.
This was a big weekend for music. 5 years in the making. We had Travis Scott's Utopia come out,
Yes.
which when you hear it, you'll know it's an absolute. I don't even know the word to describe it. It's crazy. It's a like
It is
Richie said,
crazy.
it's a beautiful mess. There's an Eminem lyric actually in his song "Walk on Water," which I always love when I think about something being crazy. He says, "My life's a Rubik's. It's a beautiful mess."
Mm-hmm.
I really love that. And so I was thinking, like, as a music producer yourself, what are your thoughts on the very experimental production side of this album? What do you kind of think about it?
I love it, and I especially love that people, like, once you're established, you're allowed, I shouldn't say allowed, but you're, like, able to do whatever you'd like and give it to the public and not have to really worry about the response, because you know that they'll receive it regardless. How they receive it doesn't necessarily matter. You know that they will, right? So you can get really experimental as Kanye. The way it was, like the first track on Utopia, the very first track is like, oh, this reminds me a lot of the way Kanye produces and sings and writes, kind of, and in some ways. And there's a couple other artists I was comparing to, I can't remember, but when you can get experimental like that, it's just like, it's like Post Malone, it's like refreshing, because you get to hear finally something you weren't expecting, something to kind of catch you off guard, and something that is new for you to digest and like really listen to. It's not the same thing where, like, all right, 30 seconds in, it's the same 45 seconds, a minute and a half, 2 minutes in, I'm listening to the same loop, and I'm like, this is great, but this isn't, I've heard a lot of songs like this. What makes this album special? And I'm not trying to say that every song has to be super special, but it's nice when they get experimental, and I love when they get experimental. Any producer, even like, I think Mike Dean just released a whole album of just like synth and crazy stuff, which for him, we didn't think he was gonna. I mean, I didn't think he'd release an album on his own, like as an artist, but he did, and it was really cool. I just, more power to them. Go experiment as much as you can, like push the boundaries, do whatever you want to do. There's no reason not to. Like, if you feel like creating it, go create it.
A lot of people talk about like the Kanye influence almost like a bad thing. They talk about how it's so derivative of Yeezus, when in reality, that was in 2013. Travis was one of the major producers of Yeezus at the same time.
And I think people forget that, like, people like Travis Scott and Kanye West are not just artists. They're like predominantly producers. They're song makers. They're not just singers and writers. They make the beats. They mix the songs. And we need this. It needs more of that. And then it has to sound like this. They're shaping the sound and sort of, coloring the music. So people, I feel like, forget that. Like, people don't know that White Iverson was produced by Post Malone. He made that beat and wrote the song. So, that's like, he's retaining all of that. And that was his claim to fame. And people were wondering if that was going to be one hit wonder. Look at him now. An artist as successful as him, to go back to your Grammy question, an artist successful as him who's never won a Grammy, I'm sure he doesn't even care. I'm sure at this point, like, I'm sure it would be nice, and I'm sure he would say, yes, I'd like to win one. But if he never did and died never winning one, I don't think he'd be turning in his grave. I think he'd be the guy to say, just wasn't in my cards, but I had a great run.
Yeah.
So I'm, the same as an Oscar, where like a lot of actors really want it.
Where like Leo, right? And I feel like Oscars are so few and far between. Versus a Grammy, like the whole team gets one. Olivia Rodrigo got one for the best record. The producer got one. I'm sure that chief engineer got one.
It's like a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's getting a Grammy. It's a lot more like frivolous, But the Oscar, like, it makes me mad to know that Leonardo DiCaprio does not have more than one Oscar.